Why did the most popular girl in school destroy her own life? Harper was the kind of popular that made other girls either worship her or secretly hate her. She had 20,000 IG followers, the quarterback boyfriend, and threw the best parties at her massive house while being cheerleading captain and student body president with the perfect GPA. But then something changed right after winter break and nobody could figure out what the hell was happening. Harper showed up to school that Monday looking like she hadn't slept in days with her hair in a messy bun and wearing sweatpants. She walked past her boyfriend without acknowledging him, and when her best friend tried to talk to her, Harper just stared through her like she was invisible. During lunch, instead of sitting at her usual table, Harper sat alone in the corner deleting every single photo from her Instagram. The next day, Harper posted this bizarre video where she was crying and laughing at the same time saying, "You guys have no idea what you're looking at when you look at me, and if you knew you'd run so fast." She deleted it within minutes, but screenshots were already everywhere. She started showing up late to cheer practice, moving like a zombie until the coach finally benched her. I saw her boyfriend tried to talk to her after school, and she looked him dead in the eyes and said she couldn't stand the sight of him anymore, which was insane because they'd been together for 2 years. But that was just the beginning of Harper completely unraveling in front of everyone. She started taking pictures of every adult man in school with her phone like she was building some kind of database, and when teachers asked her to stop, she would say she was documenting reality for the first time. She removed every photo from her locker, including family ones, and replaced them with missing persons posters she'd printed from the internet. During chemistry class, she suddenly asked the teacher if he'd ever wondered how many dangerous people walk among us pretending to be normal, and when he told her to sit down, she just walked out. She started avoiding going home, and would sit in her car in the parking lot for hours, just watching her house from across the street like she was scared to go inside. Harper started leaving notes in the principal's mailbox every morning at 6 that said things about checking criminal databases and background records according to the secretary who opened them. She would flinch whenever adult men walked past her and started recording conversations on her phone whenever her father's name came up like she was gathering evidence. Her friends tried an intervention, but Harper kept saying they lived in a bubble where monsters looked like regular people, and nobody wanted to see what was right in front of them. She stopped wearing makeup and started wearing her dad's old college sweatshirt every day, but would pull at it constantly like it was burning her skin. During assembly, she started searching things on her phone about how long DNA evidence lasted, and whether fingernails could prove anything after 5 years, which her friend saw over her shoulder. She asked a junior whose dad was a cop whether basements showed up on housing blueprints and if soundproofing materials left specific chemical traces. She started skipping classes to sit outside the guidance counselor's office writing pages and pages of something she'd immediately tear up and throw away. Then Harper did something that made everyone realize this wasn't just a weird phase. During the school assembly where she was supposed to give a speech about the fundraiser, she grabbed the microphone and started talking about how everyone was living in a fantasy and that she'd discovered something that changed everything, and she couldn't pretend anymore. Security escorted her off stage and she didn't come back for 3 days. When Harper returned, she was like a ghost, avoiding everyone, including her own reflection. She spent every free period in the library researching criminal psychology and basement construction permits for our neighborhood. Her mom started picking her up daily, and Harper would get in the car silently while her mom looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. Then last Friday, everything exploded when Harper's dad showed up during lunch with 2 police officers, and they went straight to the principal's office. 20 minutes later, they came out with Harper's phone and laptop in evidence bags, and Harper herself nowhere to be found. Someone saw her running through the parking lot that morning like something was chasing her. That afternoon, the police were at Harper's house, and neighbors heard her mom screaming, "She's just a child. She didn't know what she was seeing. This can't be happening." I found Harper hiding in the old equipment shed behind the football field where nobody ever goes, and she looked at me with hollow eyes and said the one thing I'll never forget. "My father isn't who you think he is, and tomorrow morning everyone will know what he's been doing in our basement for the past 5 years." Then she stood up and walked toward the woods behind the school. My feet stayed frozen to the ground while Harper got smaller and smaller between the trees, until she completely disappeared. My hands shook so bad I could barely get my phone out of my pocket. I started dialing 911 but stopped because what was I supposed to say? That the most popular girl in the school said something weird about her dad's basement before walking into the woods? The whole thing felt like some crazy dream, but Harper's words kept repeating in my head about what her father had been doing for 5 years. I turned and ran back toward the main building, my legs feeling like jelly. The parking lot was mostly empty since it was after 4. I burst through the side doors and almost crashed right into Tristan Lynn, who was coming out of the bathroom. He grabbed my shoulders to steady me, and his eyes went wide when he saw my face. I started talking so fast the words tumbled over each other about finding Harper in the shed and what she said about her father and the basement. Tristan's face changed from confused to shocked to scared as I kept talking. He pulled me down the hallway toward the guidance office where the lights were still on. Janice McGuire was at her desk typing something when we practically fell through her door. She looked up and immediately stood when she saw our faces. Tristan helped me explain everything while I tried to catch my breath. Janice wrote down every word I said about Harper hiding in the shed and what she told me about her father. She asked me exactly when this happened and if Harper said anything else specific. She asked about Harper's behavior the past few weeks, and I told her about the missing persons posters and the DNA searches and everything else. Janice picked up her phone and said she had to make a mandatory report right away, even though we didn't have much proof. She dialed the state abuse hotline while we sat there listening to her give Harper's full name and home address. She requested an immediate welfare check and explained Harper might be in danger. She hung up and called the local police station next to report Harper as a possible runaway or missing person. Within an hour, 2 police cars pulled up to the school, and Detective Christopher Garza walked into Janice's office. He was younger than I expected, with kind eyes but a serious face. He asked me to repeat everything Harper said word for word. He wrote it all down in a small notebook and asked about Harper's mental state, and if she'd ever made claims like this before. He explained they needed more than just Harper's statement to get a warrant for her father's basement. He said they'd check the house, but without probable cause they couldn't search specific areas. Janice gave him copies of all her notes from the past month about Harper's concerning behavior. Detective Garza left his card and said to call immediately if Harper contacted any of us. Tristan and I went back to my house and I couldn't eat dinner. I stayed up all night making a timeline on my laptop of everything weird Harper had done since winter break. Tristan came back over around 10 with his laptop and helped me organize all the screenshots people had saved. We found 12 different people who had pieces of Harper's deleted video saved. We put together screen recordings of her Instagram deletion spree and photos of her locker with the missing persons posters. Tristan found posts from other students talking about Harper's strange questions and behavior. We organized everything into folders by date with descriptions of each incident. My mom brought us coffee at 2 in the morning and asked if we were okay. We worked until the sun came up and had 3 pages of timeline plus all the digital evidence organized. I dozed off for maybe an hour before my phone started buzzing with texts. The whole school was talking about Harper never coming home last night. Her parents had filed an official missing person report at 6 that morning. The principal called an emergency assembly for first period. Harper's mom stood at the podium looking like she hadn't slept either. Her voice cracked when she asked if anyone had seen Harper or knew where she might go. She said Harper left her phone at the school and they just wanted her home safe. Some girls were crying in the front row. I felt sick knowing what Harper had told me, but not knowing if I should say it out loud to everyone. After the assembly, I found Detective Garza in the hallway and showed him the timeline Tristan and I made. He sat on a bench and went through every page carefully. He looked at all the screenshots and evidence we'd collected. He said it helped establish a pattern, but judges needed more concrete evidence for search warrants. He asked if Harper had ever shown me physical evidence or told me specific details about what she found. I told him she only mentioned the basement and 5 years. The principal's secretary found me during second period and said I needed to come to the office immediately. I walked in, and Harper's father was sitting there with a man in an expensive suit who was obviously his lawyer. Harper's father's face was red and he pointed at me the second I walked in. He said I was spreading dangerous lies about his family during their time of crisis. The lawyer said they'd sue me and my parents for defamation if I kept harassing them. He said I was making a terrible situation worse with baseless accusations. The principal looked uncomfortable and kept adjusting his tie. Right then, Janice walked in and stood next to me. She told the lawyer I had followed proper reporting protocols and acted in good faith based on Harper's own words. She said I was protected as a mandated reporter and had done nothing wrong. The principal said we all wanted Harper found safely and asked everyone to remain calm. The lawyer handed me his business card with a warning look before they left the office. My phone started buzzing immediately with a call from an unknown number. It was Marlene Lopez from Child Protective Services saying she got my report through the state hotline. She explained they couldn't do much without Harper physically present or concrete evidence of abuse happening right now. She said past allegations needed police involvement and physical proof. She asked me 20 questions about Harper's behavior changes and what exactly she told me. I gave her every detail I could remember while Janice took notes beside me. Marlene said she'd coordinate with the police but warned me these cases moved slowly through the system. After the call ended, Tristan texted me that he found something important. We met in the computer lab where he had 3 other students with him. They'd all recorded parts of Harper's weird behavior over the past 2 weeks on their phones. One girl had the entire assembly meltdown filmed from the front row. Another had Harper taking photos of male teachers during lunch. The third had Harper sitting in her car staring at her house for 2 hours straight. We spent the rest of the day organizing everything into one massive folder with dates and descriptions. We had 12 different incidents documented with video or photos. I suddenly remembered Harper searching stuff on her phone during that assembly about DNA evidence and fingernails. I called Detective Garza immediately and told him what Harper's friend saw over her shoulder. He went quiet for a moment, then said that suggested Harper might have found actual physical evidence of something. He asked if Harper ever showed me anything or gave me any items. I told him she only mentioned the basement and 5 years but nothing specific. The cheer coach found me after practice and pulled me into her office. She closed the door and said she'd been thinking about Harper since the news broke. She said Harper had bruises on her upper arms after winter break that she noticed during practice. She'd assumed they were from stunts or working out, but now she wasn't sure. She said the bruises were finger-shaped, and Harper got weird when she asked about them. She wanted to know if she should tell the police. I gave her Detective Garza's number and told her to call immediately. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Harper said about the basement. I got on my laptop and started searching public records for Harper's address. The property records showed basement renovations from exactly 5 years ago. The permits listed basic finishing work like drywall and flooring, but nothing about the soundproofing Harper had been researching. The contractor's name was listed, but when I searched for the company, it didn't exist anymore. I took screenshots of everything and added them to our evidence folder. 2 days passed with no sign of Harper anywhere. The police organized search teams to comb through the woods behind school. I signed up immediately along with half the school. We spread out in lines, walking slowly through the trees, calling Harper's name. The woods were bigger than I realized, with trails going in every direction. I kept thinking about Harper walking into these same woods looking so broken. We searched for 6 hours, finding nothing but old beer cans and trash. On the second day of searching, I went back to the area near where I'd last seen Harper. I followed a deer trail deeper into the woods than the main search teams had gone. Under some leaves near a fallen tree, I saw something black. It was Harper's phone, covered in dirt and dead. I didn't touch it, but called Detective Garza immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes with an evidence team. They photographed everything before bagging the phone carefully. Garza said their tech team would try to recover any data even though it was dead. 3 days later, Garza called me with an update. The tech team had recovered Harper's search history from her phone. She'd been researching 5 missing women from our area repeatedly for weeks. All of them had vanished over the past 5 years. All were between 16 and 22 years old. All had brown hair like Harper. Garza said they were now looking for connections between these cases and Harper's father. He couldn't share more, but said this was becoming much bigger than they initially thought. The principal's secretary found me the next morning before first period. She looked around nervously, then whispered that she needed to tell me something. She said Harper's dad had been in yesterday arguing with the principal about containing the situation and protecting the school's reputation. She said he was demanding they control what students were saying and threatened to pull his donations. She'd kept copies of all those notes Harper left in the principal's mailbox about checking criminal databases. She handed me a folder with photocopies of 12 different notes. Each one mentioned specific things to investigate about people's backgrounds. Some had dates and locations that didn't make sense to me yet. I gave everything to Detective Garza that afternoon. That night around 11, my phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number. It said Harper was safe but couldn't come forward yet. The message mentioned something specific about our chemistry class that only Harper would know about, a joke our teacher made about periodic table elements. I immediately forwarded it to Garza, who said they'd try to trace it, but blocked numbers were nearly impossible to track. The text gave me hope that Harper was alive somewhere even if she couldn't come home yet. The next morning, Marlene Lopez called me during first period asking if I could meet after school with her, Janice, and Detective Garza. I got to Janice's office at 3:30, where they were already waiting with papers spread across the desk. Marlene explained they needed to coordinate everything we knew, but had to be careful about protecting Harper, even if that meant moving slowly. She kept checking her phone and writing notes while Garza went through the timeline I'd made, asking specific questions about dates and times. After an hour of going through everything, Marlene said they had enough to keep building the case but needed more concrete evidence. That evening, I was doing homework when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the other end said she was Harper's neighbor and had seen the news coverage about Harper being missing. She told me about hearing strange noises from their house late at night for the past year, like hammering and drilling sounds. She remembered seeing delivery trucks bringing construction materials to their house last summer, but thought they were just doing normal renovations. I took notes on everything she said and texted Garza immediately, who said he'd contact her directly. The next day at lunch, Tristan showed me something on his phone that made my stomach drop. He'd been scrolling through old social media posts from parties at Harper's house and found one from 2 years ago, where you could see boxes in their hallway. When he zoomed in, the labels were clear as day, reading acoustic foam and sound-dampening panels. We sent the screenshot to Garza right away, who responded that this was exactly the kind of evidence they needed to establish a timeline. Later that afternoon, Garza called me with an update about the missing persons Harper had been researching. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. He said none of them had any official connection to Harper's father that they could find yet, but he was now looking at when each woman disappeared compared to when the basement was renovated. The dates were starting to line up in ways that made him suspicious, but he needed more to make it solid. 2 days later, I was walking to my car after school when I saw Harper's mom sitting in her car in the parking lot looking lost. She got out when she saw me and walked over with tears already running down her face. She grabbed my arm and whispered that she'd found something in the basement after Harper ran away, but her husband made her promise to stay quiet about it. Her hands were shaking so bad she could barely hold her car keys, and she kept looking around like someone might be watching us. I told her she needed to talk to Detective Garza about whatever she'd found, and after a few minutes of crying, she finally agreed. We got in my car and I drove her to the police station while she sat in the passenger seat twisting her wedding ring and mumbling about how she should have known something was wrong. At the station, Garza met us in the lobby and took us to a private room where Harper's mom could talk without anyone hearing. She was in there for 3 hours while I waited in the lobby reading the same magazine over and over. When she came out, her face was completely white, and Garza had his hand on her shoulder telling her she'd done the right thing. That evening around 7:30, I got an email that made me sick to my stomach. Harper's father's lawyer had sent cease and desist letters to me, Tristan, and several other students demanding we stop spreading false information about their client. The letter threatened legal action if we continued talking about the case and accused us of defamation and harassment. I immediately forwarded it to Janice, who called me within 5 minutes telling me not to worry. She said she'd already contacted a legal aid attorney who specialized in witness protection, and he confirmed we were protected since we were cooperating with an active investigation. The next morning, the junior whose dad was a cop found me before homeroom and pulled me aside. He said his dad had mentioned Harper's case at dinner last night, and apparently the whole department was working on something bigger than just a missing person case. His dad said they were trying to find a specific location within the house, but needed more precise information about the layout. That's when I remembered Harper asking about blueprints and basement layouts during her breakdown, and how obsessed she'd been with construction permits. During lunch, I went to the city records office and requested the original house plans for Harper's address from when it was built in 1987. The clerk printed them out for $5, and when I compared them to the renovation permits from 5 years ago, something didn't match up. The original plans showed a utility closet in the basement that wasn't mentioned in any of the renovation paperwork, and the square footage numbers we were off by about 100 feet. I took photos of both documents and sent them to Garza, who replied immediately saying this was huge, and asking if I could bring the originals to the station. 3 days after Harper had disappeared into the woods, we finally got news about her. A gas station attendant 2 towns over had called the police after seeing Harper's photo on the news and recognizing her from security footage. The video showed Harper buying water bottles and sandwiches at 2 in the morning before walking out and disappearing into the darkness again. At least we knew she was still alive and trying to take care of herself, even if she wasn't ready to come home yet. Detective Garza called me the next morning while I was eating breakfast and asked if I could meet him at the station after school. When I got there, he led me to the same private room and closed the door behind us. He sat down across from me and pulled out a folder with Harper's name on it. He told me Harper had reached out to them through a victim advocate at a women's shelter 3 towns over. She was safe and providing information, but wasn't ready to come forward publicly yet. He said she'd been staying at the shelter under a different name, and the staff there was helping her process everything. The advocate had been working with Harper to document her memories and gather any evidence she might have kept. Garza showed me a photo Harper had sent them of a journal she'd been keeping since winter break, with dates and descriptions of things she'd found. He couldn't show me the details, but said it was helping them build a timeline of what happened in that house. That same afternoon, the school board called an emergency meeting about what everyone was calling the situation, even though Harper's name was all over social media. Parents packed the auditorium and the arguments got so loud security had to step in twice. Half the parents wanted the school to support the investigation fully, while the other half worried about the school's reputation and property values. Some moms stood up and started yelling about how this was all rumors, and the school shouldn't be involved in destroying a good family's name. Another parent shot back that protecting kids should matter more than protecting the school's image. The principal tried to keep order, but people were recording everything on their phones and posting it live. The board finally voted to cooperate fully with law enforcement and provide counseling services for affected students. 2 days later, Harper's mom filed for an emergency protective order against her husband and moved out of their house. Her lawyer released a statement saying she was cooperating fully with the investigation and had no knowledge of any illegal activities. I saw her at the grocery store looking like she'd lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. She was buying basic supplies and her hands shook as she loaded bags into her car. The cashier told me later that Harper's mom had been staying at her sister's place across town. That Friday morning, I woke up to sirens and saw on the local news that a forensic team had arrived at Harper's house with a warrant. Neighbors stood on their lawns watching as people in white suits carried evidence bags and photography equipment through the front door. The news helicopter circled overhead while reporters interviewed anyone who would talk. I rode my bike over and watched from down the street as they set up a tent in the driveway. Box after box came out labeled with evidence tape and loaded into a van. The forensic team was there for 8 hours, and neighbors said they heard drilling sounds from inside. One guy in a hazmat suit carried out what looked like pieces of drywall in clear plastic bags. The whole neighborhood felt different with yellow tape around Harper's house, and cops stationed at both ends of the street. Tristan met me at the coffee shop that evening, and we sat there refreshing the news on our phones. We'd gotten closer through all this mess and spent most afternoons together trying to make sense of everything. He'd been keeping track of all the social media posts and screenshots people had taken of Harper's breakdown. We both felt guilty for not seeing the signs sooner, even though we barely knew Harper before this. Tristan had started having nightmares about basements and hidden rooms. We stayed at the coffee shop until they closed, just so we didn't have to be alone with our thoughts. The next morning, Detective Garza called me again, and his voice sounded different this time. He said they'd found the hidden room Harper had discovered behind what looked like a normal utility closet. The construction matched the timeline from the permits I'd found with the missing square footage. No victims were present, but they'd found evidence of long-term captivity, including restraints bolted to the walls. There were scratch marks on the inside of the door and DNA samples from multiple sources. The room had been soundproofed with professional materials just like Harper had researched. Garza said Harper must have stumbled onto it during winter break when her parents were out of town. They found her fingerprints on the hidden door mechanism, which explained why she'd been so obsessed with DNA evidence lasting. 3 hours after that call, the news broke that Harper's father had been arrested on charges of unlawful imprisonment and obstruction of justice. His lawyer held a press conference claiming it was all a misunderstanding about a private storage space for valuables. He said his client was a respected businessman who was railroaded by a troubled teenager's delusions. But the evidence was already being processed, and more charges were expected soon. The arrest video showed Harper's dad in handcuffs being led to a police car, while photographers pressed against the barriers. His face stayed blank like he was somewhere else entirely. By Monday morning, media vans lined up outside our school, and reporters tried to interview students walking in. The administration put strict protocols in place with security checking IDs at every entrance. They sent home a letter saying any student who talked to media on the school property would face suspension. Janice set up support groups for those of us involved and brought in extra counselors. She helped me write down everything I remembered without the reporters finding out. The principal made an announcement that the school was a safe space, and harassment of any students wouldn't be tolerated. But everyone whispered in the hallways, and Harper's empty desk in chemistry became this weird shrine with flowers and notes. Thursday afternoon, I was walking to my car when I saw Harper in the main hallway with a woman in a suit. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, but also determined in a way I'd never seen before. She saw me and mouthed "thank you" before following the woman into the interview room. I found out later she'd come to give her official statement with a victim advocate from the state. She was there for 6 hours going through everything with detectives and prosecutors. Janice told me Harper was incredibly brave, and her testimony would be crucial for the case. Within days of the arrest making national news, 5 families of missing women contacted the police. They'd seen Harper's father's photo and recognized him from their daughter's last known locations. Detective Garza's team started the long process of connecting evidence from the basement to cold cases. 3 of the missing women had disappeared from areas where Harper's dad had business trips. The other 2 had worked at companies where he'd been a consultant years ago. The forensic evidence from the hidden room was matched against DNA from the missing persons database. The matches started coming back positive for 3 of the missing women within 48 hours. I was sitting in the cafeteria when the news alert popped up on my phone about Harper's father's bail hearing being scheduled for that afternoon. The judge set it at $2 million after the prosecutor showed evidence that he'd been transferring money to offshore accounts for years and had property in countries without extradition treaties. His lawyer argued for lower bail, but the judge said the flight risk was too high with multiple potential murder charges coming. They froze all his assets that same day, including the house and his company accounts, while investigators started tracing where the money went. The school called an emergency staff meeting that Monday morning, and I saw teachers coming out looking shaken. The principal sent out an email saying they were implementing mandatory reporting training for all staff members starting immediately. The cheer coach found Harper's mom in the parking lot after the training and broke down crying while apologizing for not seeing the signs. She kept saying she should have known something was wrong when Harper started flinching during practice, and how she'd failed as a coach. Harper's mom just hugged her and said nobody could have known what was happening in their house. I couldn't sleep that night thinking about all the times I'd seen Harper acting strange, and wondered if I should have said something sooner. The guilt was eating me up so bad that I couldn't focus in class and kept replaying every interaction looking for signs I'd missed. Janice called me into her office and could tell immediately that I was struggling. She sat me down and reminded me that I did exactly the right thing when Harper finally told me about the basement. She explained that victims often hide abuse for years, and the important thing was that I believed her and took action when it mattered. She set me up with a counselor who specialized in secondary trauma, and gave me permission to leave class whenever I needed to talk. Some kids from student council started a collection for Harper and her mom since all their money was frozen during the investigation. Even people who'd barely talked to Harper threw in $20 or $50 because they felt bad about not noticing her distress. The collection grew to over $8,000 in 3 days, which they gave to Harper's mom through the Victim Services Coordinator. Marlene Lopez called me and Tristan to thank us for documenting everything so carefully. She said our timeline and evidence collection created the foundation that got Harper the help she needed, and would be crucial for the prosecution. She was working on finding long-term placement for Harper with relatives out of state, where she could get intensive therapy away from all the media attention. My phone buzzed during lunch on Thursday with a text from an unknown number. It was Harper saying she was in a safe place getting help, and wanted me to know she was going to be okay, even though she wasn't ready to come back to the school yet. She thanked me for believing her and said knowing someone cared enough to listen saved her life. I showed the message to Janice, who smiled and said Harper was incredibly strong to reach out. Detective Garza called that afternoon to let us know the FBI was joining the investigation, because evidence suggested crimes might have crossed state lines. He said he'd still be our local contact, but the case was expanding beyond what the local department could handle alone. They'd found evidence that Harper's father had rented storage units in 3 different states, where the missing women had disappeared. The FBI brought in their behavioral analysis unit and started connecting patterns between the victims and Harper's father's travel records. Harper's mom filed for divorce the next week, and the papers showed she was seeking an emergency order for sole custody and a restraining order. She'd started seeing a therapist twice a week, according to Janice, who was helping coordinate support services. Harper's mom sent a message through Janice thanking everyone who believed Harper and took action to help them escape that nightmare. She said she'd been blind to what was happening and would never forgive herself for not protecting her daughter, but was grateful for the people who stepped up when Harper needed them most. 2 weeks after the arrest, the news broke that made everyone go silent. DNA evidence from the basement matched the remains of Sarah Foster, who'd been missing for 4 years. The medical examiner confirmed she'd been held captive for months before she died, based on evidence they found. The prosecutor immediately upgraded the charges against Harper's father to first-degree murder, along with the kidnapping and false imprisonment charges. More families started contacting the police saying their missing daughters had connections to areas where Harper's father had business. The principal announced a special assembly for the following Monday about recognizing signs of abuse and trauma. They brought in experts from the state to help students process what had happened without turning Harper's story into gossip. The assembly felt different from usual school talks because everyone knew this was real and had happened to someone we all knew. The expert talked about how predators often hide in plain sight, and victims sometimes can't speak up for years because of fear or manipulation. She explained that Harper's behavior changes were classic signs of someone discovering traumatic information and trying to find help without knowing how. Students asked questions about what we should have done differently, and the expert kept emphasizing that Harper's friends couldn't have known without her telling them. She said the important thing was that when Harper finally found the courage to speak up through her actions, people listened and got her help. Tristan started organizing meetings in the library after school where students could talk about what happened with Harper. He put up flyers saying anyone who felt weird or scared about the whole thing could come. The first meeting had 12 people show up, and we all just sat there not knowing what to say at first. Tristan brought cookies and juice boxes, which helped break the ice somehow. We started meeting every Tuesday, and more kids showed up each week. Some were Harper's old friends, and others were just random students who felt messed up by everything. We talked about how we missed the signs and how scary it was to realize monsters could look so normal. The meetings helped us feel less alone in dealing with all the crazy stuff that went down. Harper's best friend showed up to the 4th meeting looking like she hadn't slept in days. She kept saying she should have known something was wrong when Harper started acting weird. She told us about the intervention they tried and how Harper kept talking about monsters looking like regular people. Janice came to that meeting and explained that nobody could have known what Harper was dealing with. She said predators are really good at hiding and victims often can't talk about it directly. Harper's friend cried for like 20 minutes while we all sat there not knowing what to do. Janice gave her some tissues and said guilt wouldn't help Harper, but support would. The friend started coming to every meeting after that and slowly stopped blaming herself so much. 3 weeks later, I got called to the courthouse to talk to the grand jury about everything I saw. The prosecutor met with me first to go over what they'd ask me about. She said my notes and timeline were super important for showing when Harper discovered the truth. I sat in this big room with 23 people staring at me while I answered questions. They wanted to know every detail about finding Harper in the shed and what she said about her dad. The prosecutor asked about the timeline I made and all the weird stuff Harper did after winter break. I showed them the screenshots of her deleted video and explained how she researched missing people. The whole thing took 3 hours and my hands were shaking the entire time. When I finished, the prosecutor said our evidence helped prove Harper discovered something real, not imagined. Harper's dad went to court the next month and his lawyer said he wasn't guilty of anything. The news showed him in a suit looking all normal while his lawyers talked about lack of proof. They said the basement room could have been for storage and the DNA might be contaminated. The prosecutor told us not to worry because they had tons of physical evidence from the basement. She said they found restraints bolted to the walls and scratch marks everywhere. They had DNA from hair and blood that matched missing women from years ago. The defense could say whatever they wanted, but the evidence was solid. More test results came back linking 3 more missing women to Harper's dad's basement. The families of those women had been searching for years without answers. One mom had been putting up posters for 5 years hoping her daughter would come home. The police called each family privately before releasing the names to the media. Our town held a memorial service at the park for all the victims they identified. Hundreds of people showed up with candles and flowers to remember the women. Some families spoke about their daughters and what they were like before they disappeared. It was the saddest thing I'd ever been to, but also important for everyone to grieve together. Harper decided she couldn't come back to our school after everything that happened. Marlene told us Harper was living with an aunt in another state to get away from everything. She was doing online classes to finish junior year while getting therapy twice a week. Harper wanted to graduate on time so she could still go to college next year. Her mom moved to the same town to be near her and start over somewhere new. They both needed to be far away from the house and all the memories. The principal called a staff meeting that nobody was supposed to know about, but word got out anyway. He announced he'd be retiring at the end of the school year after 30 years. Everyone knew it was because of how he handled Harper's situation at first. He'd ignored her weird behavior and the notes she left instead of investigating properly. Parents had been calling for his resignation since the truth came out about Harper's dad. The school board probably told him to retire quietly instead of getting fired publicly. Detective Garza came to the school to talk about starting a program for students. He wanted to teach kids how to recognize warning signs and report stuff safely. The program would meet once a month and cover things like how predators work and what to do if someone tells you something bad. He said what we did for Harper showed that young people could make a difference. Lots of students signed up because we all felt like we needed to learn from what happened. Garza brought in other cops and social workers to help teach the classes. Marlene stopped by one of our support group meetings to give us an update on Harper. She said Harper was doing better in therapy and starting to process everything that happened. Harper was even thinking about maybe helping other survivors someday when she was ready. Her therapist said she was really strong and making good progress dealing with the trauma. Marlene couldn't share details but wanted us to know Harper was going to be okay eventually. 6 months went by before we heard the news that Harper's dad took a plea deal. He admitted guilt to avoid trial and got life in prison without any chance of parole. This meant Harper and her mom wouldn't have to testify in court and relive everything. The prosecutor said it was the best outcome because the families got justice without more trauma. Harper's mom sent a message through Marlene saying they were relieved it was finally over. 2 weeks later, the principal called an assembly where he read Harper's letter out loud to the whole school. She wrote about finding the strength to speak up even when nobody believed her at first. She thanked me and Tristan by name for listening when she had nobody else to turn to. She thanked the counselor and the detective for taking her seriously when it mattered most. She told other students that if something bad was happening to them, they should keep trying until someone listened. The letter said she knew it was hard, but staying silent only helped the people hurting you. By the time the principal finished reading, there wasn't a single person not crying in that auditorium. The school board met the next week and voted to create something called the Safe Disclosure Protocol. They didn't use Harper's last name, but everyone knew it was because of what happened to her. The new rules meant any student who reported something serious would get immediate support and protection. They hired 2 more counselors just to handle these kinds of situations going forward. The protocol included training for all teachers on recognizing warning signs and responding the right way. At the end-of-year award ceremony, they called Tristan and me up on stage for a special citizenship award. It felt weird getting recognized for doing what any decent person should have done. We accepted it but said we were taking it for everyone who helped Harper through everything. The principal shook our hands, but you could tell he was uncomfortable since everyone knew he was retiring because of this. Harper's mom contacted the school through her lawyer saying the house finally sold after sitting empty for months. She donated all the money from the sale to a fund for victims of violent crimes. She sent updates through the counselor about how they were doing in their new city 3 states away. She was working at a nonprofit now, and Harper was finishing school online while getting lots of therapy. Spring came and college acceptance letters started arriving for all the seniors, including me, even though I was just a junior. I got into the State University's social work program with early admission, which I applied for after everything that happened. Working with the counselor and the social worker showed me that's what I wanted to do with my life. Tristan got accepted to the criminal justice program at the same school because Detective Garza inspired him so much. We were both going to the same college, which made everything less scary about leaving home. Graduation day arrived and nobody expected Harper to show up since she'd been gone for months. But right before they started calling names, she walked in with her aunt and 2 cousins surrounding her protectively. She looked different with shorter hair and more confidence in how she carried herself than before. When they called her name, the entire auditorium erupted in the loudest cheering I'd ever heard at a graduation. She walked across that stage with her head held high and accepted her diploma like she'd earned every bit of it. People stood up and kept clapping until she sat back down with her family, who never stopped smiling at her. After graduation, there was a big party at someone's house, and Harper actually showed up for a little while. We ended up talking by the pool away from everyone else for the first time since everything happened. She told me she was planning to study psychology in college to understand trauma and help other survivors heal. She said therapy saved her life, and she wanted to do that for other people who went through terrible things. She seemed stronger and more focused than the popular girl I remembered from before winter break. Detective Garza stopped by the party, which surprised everyone since cops don't usually show up unless there's trouble. He found me and Tristan to tell us the investigation ended up solving 7 cold cases from the past decade. He said our documentation and refusal to give up made all the difference in building the case. 3 of those cases were the missing women Harper had researched, and 4 others nobody had connected before. He shook our hands and said we showed him that young people could change things when adults weren't paying attention. A week before we left for college, a package arrived from Harper's mom with graduation gifts for everyone who helped. Inside were these nice pens with our names engraved and handwritten thank you notes on fancy paper. Her note to me said she'd never forget how I found Harper and got her help when she needed it most. She wrote that she was working with state legislators now to make reporting laws stronger for schools. She wanted to make sure what happened to them could help protect other families from going through the same thing. The last week of summer, Harper surprised everyone by starting a blog about surviving trauma and finding justice. She was careful not to share details that could identify victims, but she wrote honestly about the healing process. She posted about therapy techniques that helped her and resources for other survivors trying to rebuild their lives. The blog got thousands of followers in just the first few days as people shared it everywhere. She wrote about how justice doesn't fix everything, but it helps you start moving forward with your life. The week before we all left for college, I stopped by the community center to drop off some donation boxes and saw Harper in the gym teaching a self-defense class to about 15 teenage girls. She was showing them how to break a wrist hold and demonstrating the moves with this calm confidence I'd never seen from her before. The girls were watching her so carefully and taking notes while Harper walked around adjusting their stances and explaining how to use someone's weight against them. She had this genuine smile on her face as she helped a younger girl who kept messing up the technique, and when the girl finally got it right, Harper gave her this big high five. After class ended, Harper saw me and waved me over to help her put the mats away. She told me teaching these classes made her feel like she was taking back control and giving other girls tools she wished she'd had sooner. 5 years went by faster than I expected with college, and starting my social work job at a youth shelter downtown. Then last month, I got this fancy invitation to a book launch party at a hotel conference room for Harper's memoir about trauma and systemic change in protective services. When I walked in, Tristan was already there wearing a detective badge just like Garza used to have, and talking to Marlene, who'd become a regional director for child services. Harper stood at the podium looking professional in a business suit, talking about how her worst experience became her mission to reform how institutions handle disclosure and protect victims. What a joy to tell that one. Thanks for listening with an open heart. It makes it all worth it. Subscribe if you'd like to keep making more happy memories here.